Okay, it's 6:15, so I'll call to order the April 4th, 2019 meeting of the North St. Paul Planning Commission. So first thing we'll do is introduce our new secretary, so I'll have Molly do that if you would.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Folks, this is Olivia Borschinger. She is the new Planning Commission Secretary. She's actually just finishing up her master's degree in planning and has a good variety of background in planning and planning-related fields. So I will just pass it over to Olivia for a moment, and she can tell you a little about herself.
Okay,
Yes, thank you, Molly. Like I said, my name's Olivia Bershinger.
just move the mic toward you.
My name's Olivia Bershinger, and I am finishing up my master's at the University of Minnesota. And prior to coming to North St. Paul, I was interning with a variety of different places, one of which was a private consulting firm that does planning in the Twin Cities and down in Texas, as well as I did a summer internship with Minnesota Housing, and actually used to work in the housing field even before going to grad school, working with refugee and immigrant clients. So,
Okay, welcome.
thank you.
And Olivia is, until the end of May, she is with us Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Here at City Hall.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then, we might as well do roll call if you would.
Sure. Elaine Barton, Commission Chair.
Here.
Michael Stallman, Commission Vice Chair.
Here.
Tom Sonic, Commission City Council Liaison.
Here.
Chris Bathurst. Absent, excused. Rick Gelbman. Absent, excused. Tricia Ham.
Here.
John Wall.
Here.
Alan Worm.
Okay, we have a quorum then. Can I just do one quick thing? Mike is not Commission Vice Chair. That's
Previous year.
prior. I've noticed that and forgot to mention it on the last couple
too.
agendas. That's Tricia.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, then, first order of business is to adopt the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to add? I have one item that I'd like to add under 7, Commission Business Action items, I guess, and that's just to kind of firm up the staff public hearing input process.
Duly noted.
If nobody has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Tricia, second by John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Then on to the approval of this March 7th meeting minutes. Anybody have any corrections or changes that oh, you're using your,
Yeah, I didn't get one.
oh,
And I think it's because I said I don't need to get one. I
Okay.
can just do it on my iPad. It's not a big deal. But, yeah.
But you did receive it by email?
I did receive it by email,
Okay,
yes.
good.
I just didn't get it delivered to me.
anybody have anything that they noticed? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Mike, second by Al. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. That's also unanimous. Then we have meeting open to the public, so if there's anyone here who has something they want to speak with the commission about that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to do that. Okay, then we'll move on to our public hearing, which is for a text amendment to enable pawn shops and eliminate payday loans.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So what you have before you is, in part, some housekeeping to the zoning ordinance. In 2009, the City Council adopted a pawn shop ordinance as part of the larger city code. At that time, as I said, the ordinance was to include a pawn shop ordinance. At that time, there was no pawn shop itself that came to apply and ultimately become part of the city. Currently, there is a pawn shop that is interested in coming into North St. Paul. in working with the pawn shop and with really an interdepartmental staff team to figure out what would be appropriate for North St. Paul, where and how and why and all of that good stuff. It was determined that the zoning ordinance should define pawn shop as well as call out where in the city it would be appropriate for a pawn shop to locate, and any other general provisions to regulate pawn shops as to zoning. As I said, there's an interdepartmental staff team working on this. We did determine that one pawn shop at a time, especially as we get started in North St. Paul, and given that North St. Paul is very small, one pawn shop at a time would be appropriate. So keep that in mind when you take a look at the proposed zoning language. There is a definition for pawn shop. This is a very standard definition. I did a lot of research, looked a lot at what our neighbors are doing, and so came up with this definition here. Also, where a pawn shop could be located, excuse me, the mixed-use 3 zoning district, which is sort of the commercial industrial edge zoning classification, seemed most appropriate, and to allow it by conditional use. We just had a conditional use permit before you last month. So this is a similar situation. The use could be permissible, but needs to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Is this location okay for this use, and what is proposed by the use? So that is how staff is proposing how and where to allow pawn shops. Also, when looking at a modern-day pawn shop ordinance for the city code and looking at what other jurisdictions are doing, and in my own experience with pawn shops and sometimes what may pop up around them, I noticed that the city allows payday loans in this same district by conditional use permit. So I sort of vetted that internally. Are there currently any payday loans in the city? Is this a use that seems appropriate for the city? And the consensus was no. We know that there's not a payday loan operating in the city, and that it's not appropriate for the small city of North St. Paul. So for those reasons, payday loans would be eliminated from uses allowed in North St. Paul. So the use tables, as well as the parking tables, have been updated to reflect adding pawn shops and eliminating payday loans. North St. Paul has a wonderful section of the zoning ordinance that deals with general regulations. So really it addresses many, many, many uses that are allowed in North St. Paul but need to be given some additional guidance. So here in a new section for pawn shops in the general regulations, we talk about how and why they may be allowed, but we also make the link with the larger city code, that revised chapter for pawn shops. So we did need to make sure that the zoning ordinance spoke to the larger city code. And this is where we do that in this section. So that's actually really it for the text amendments. So what's also following along with the city council, so when the city council sees these zoning text amendments, they will see an update to the existing pawn shop ordinance, as well as ancillary fees and the like. So there's a larger package going through. After these ordinance updates and amendments are adopted, then the interested pawn shop will file for a conditional use permit, which, as you know, will come before you. The city's pawn shop ordinance within the city code will limit hours of operation. So, and as I said, there will only be one location at a time. So you already will have the hours of operation, the maximum hours dealt with when the conditional use permit comes before you. Of course, that will be part of the conditional use permit, but so we should anticipate if these changes go before the city council later this month, that the conditional use permit would probably be filed next month. So the conditional use permit would be before you pretty shortly. Any questions?
I'm just curious about the, being able to, sorry. I'm just curious about the, being able to limit it to one. I haven't seen that before, and I'm just curious what the
So-
foundation for that is.
Well, we can do that. The city attorney was one of the members of the interdepartmental staff team. The city of Osseo, so like I said, we looked out and just to see what our neighbors are doing. And the city of Osseo also only allows one at a time. And really, as long as that's clear in your ordinance and you've provided the foundation for why that should be the case, that's okay.
So what is the reason why? What's the foundation for that then? Is it just the size of North St. Paul, or is there
That
another
is
specific
a
reason?
big part, and because of the, there can be some sort of negative side effects that come around with pawn shops. And so because there can be, we would like to say, okay, in North St. Paul, where there really aren't a lot of commercial districts, for one, and where we want to make sure that all of our uses are scaled to the size of North St. Paul, that one seems to be appropriate at a time. And so we have looked at what other communities are doing as to sort of foundational language, and there's really a consensus on, because there can be negative ancillary impacts with pawn shops. The city wants to make sure that the city can accommodate it based on its services and staff. So police department, with pawn shops these days, you do have to record each transaction. You have to keep detail on that. So small city, small police force, and the police force is usually, and will be the case here, who bears the brunt of regulating and tracking all of the data, really good data. But yeah, we need to be able to accommodate the needs of the new business coming into the city. So, maybe in the future, if it goes well, we can certainly look at it again and make the change. And with conditional use permits, we do look at them annually also. So conditional use permits can be a flexible tool in that regard. So we're excited and feel that this is a good approach to take for North St. Paul.
And what about the payday loans? Why eliminate that? Is that something that other cities have done as well? I know there are a lot of pawn shops that have that in various cities, so what determined that?
So there are a few things. There's check cashing, which is not the same as a payday loan.
Right.
We've just found that payday loans can be, I don't want to say predatory, but there's just a social side to it that North St. Paul, we did have a work session with the city council, and in speaking with them, there seemed to be agreement with staff that that's really not something that we're interested in having here, that with the rates that can be charged at payday loan services, it's not something that we want to promote.
Have other cities in the surrounding area done the same?
Yes.
Did you have a question, Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as one of the impacts, I mean, we had, our police chief was at the meeting, at the workshop when we talked about this, and I wonder if you could talk about this a little bit too, Molly, if you're familiar with how this works with the police department. But there is, anytime there's a pawn shop that comes into a neighborhood, there's an agreement and a setup where there's a regular fees that are basically funneled to the police department because of the known or clearly expected impact that will be on the police department. So it's going to take a lot of our police department resources, maybe not a lot, but, it will definitely have an impact on our police department. And so that has to be built into it just to establish a pawn shop in the area. So when you look at limiting it to one, for one thing, there's there are the impacts to the police department, but also, there's a certain impact on the view of the city when you have pawn shops moving in. I think we want to try and promote different types of businesses coming in. And with the payday loans, that was another thing that our police chief just, felt strongly about too, that there's just legal loan sharking. And it's just something that we don't want to really kind of promote in our city.
Any other questions?
Molly, do you know how that system works with pawn shops because there are certain fees because they have to record everything that comes in. So in case somebody does come forward with a report of stolen property, that they can check it against what's at the pawn shops.
Waiting
Right.
period.
So I believe the service is called ABS, and the city of Minneapolis administers it, and local communities can work with the city to. So what they do is we record the information that we get from the pawn shop, and that information then goes to Minneapolis for review. So if we have a fee of $2 or $3, say, a lot of that would go for the fee that Minneapolis charges us, and then a little bit of it would go to the city of North St. Paul to try and cover its staffing costs. At this point, like we said, okay, maybe one at a time is appropriate, but we don't want to have to hire additional staff to accommodate one business or a new type of business coming in. So this does seem appropriate for now. And like you said, it's a number of things were considered with the payday loan and the pawn shop. We spent actually several months looking at what would be most appropriate for North St. Paul, because many different sizes and types of communities have pawn shops, but what's appropriate for North St. Paul? And yes, the police chief was very much involved and has been heavily involved with the determining of the fees and making sure that the software and everything can be accommodated by North St. Paul. So this is a really well vetted and thought out, in my opinion, set of ordinances.
So is that legally required for cities to participate in that, or is that just something that you do to cover yours, so we're covered?
It's
Like
required.
is it state law that you have to?
Yes, and what we've found or heard from other communities is that the data that comes from the pawn shop recording all of the transactions can be very helpful to police departments. That's more often than not how police departments find.
Stolen goods. Okay.
Any other questions before I open the public hearing portion? Okay, then it's 6:35, so I'll open the public input portion of the public hearing. If you're here to speak on the pawn shop ordinance, then now would be the time to do it. Okay, okay. He's the only one here, so I'll close the public hearing. And we'll bring it back to the commission. Could I ask, just on the definition of pawn shop, and it's probably one of those technical things, because I read it a couple times and thought,
And I
This
thought
doesn't
we
make
spent a
sense.
lot of time writing that a number of years ago.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm asking specifically in the second sentence, where it says, which goods are held by the pawnbroker of the money occupying the facility. That doesn't make sense to me. I just wonder why we don't say, which goods are held by the pawnbroker of the facility as collateral for the loan. Why do we have the money occupying? Means money being held, but it just, like I say, it just seemed to kind of muddy up the sentence a little bit for me, that's all. So I'll just pass that on, you don't have to do it, but
Thank you.
it was just one of those things that struck me. Anybody else have anything? I mean, we're actually just adding the use, adding one use, deleting the other use from the use tables, and then really kind of substituting for the number of parking spaces required. And a lot of the rest of it is just in the general regulations, as it would be for any other business, as far as the standards, other than what's in the, whatever regulation or ordinance. Is that in business licensing that is?
Yes.
Yeah, so,
And I couldn't find it, but isn't it restricted to a certain district? I
yeah,
can't
that's on
remember.
the table.
But that wasn't
MU3.
changed, was it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to recommend that the council adopt the text amendment to enable pawn shops and eliminate payday loan use.
So moved.
Moved by John.
Second?
Was that you,
Mike.
Mike?
Yep, I got a little bit of a cold.
Second by Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none? Okay, that was unanimous. You had a questioning look on your face, Molly. Did you have, no?
Just thinking.
Oh, okay. Oh,
That's my thinking face.
I believe that's the first time I've ever seen that.
I did set it up for you.
Yeah, that was a good one, thank you. Okay, next item is, the commission business action item. So that would be good timing, the public hearing process. And it was really the input process. And I had talked to Molly about this because, if you look at our public hearing notice, and I brought one, it tells people about the public hearing, and it's a nice notice because it does give more detail than it used to about what the topic is. But it says at the end that such persons with desire to be heard with reference to this matter will be heard at the meeting. Then it says written and oral comments will be considered and should be submitted by the Thursday before the meeting. Now, of course, by that time, the packet isn't out the Thursday before the meeting, so there were a couple issues I had with that because there's that window of time between that Thursday and the time of the meeting that I think we would still take written and oral comments once people have had a chance to see what the packet, the actual information about the proposal. So I just wanted some clarification from staff on going forward, how they would like to handle this. And also, I think we should include a contact, who to provide that information to.
Sure thing. Well, as part of the advertisement, there's the details for City Hall included, but it would be appropriate to add Olivia, the Planning Commission Secretary, her phone number and email address for any emailed comments. And also, I would, pardon me, I would propose adding language saying that input provided before that Thursday deadline will be included in the Planning Commission packet, and information after that, information that is submitted, will be presented to the Planning Commission on the night of the meeting.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't think any of us wants to, with some of the projects that are coming up, we don't want to get comments like, I hate it, I love it. I mean, as input, that's not particularly helpful, but it's about all people can say before they see what's in the actual recommendation. So you can coordinate that then and make sure that happens.
Yes.
Excellent. Is that okay with everybody? We have.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Then on to reports from staff. So we already did the text amendment. So we're on to B, sale of vacant property for residential use.
Okay, so this property may be familiar to everyone or to some of you. So for the record, in 2011, the City Council authorized purchase of this property, which is located at 2557 12th Avenue East, which sounds like a very specific address. It's also a bit of a landmark for those of us who leave City Hall, turn right, and then turn left to get to McKnight and 36. So it's at the corner of 12th and Margaret. And it is a lot that the City Council authorized purchase of so as to hopefully prematurely promote the sale of the property. The property was almost abandoned. The house was very much in poor condition. The city building administrator had made all of the necessary steps to declare the property essentially blighted, but it had not yet gone through all of the steps where the city could take the property through forfeiture. So in order to speed along the process to take the property, reclaim it, if you will, and sell it, the City Council authorized purchasing the property by the city, that the city would purchase the property. So the city did do that, and as you can read in the letter that was attached, which was really sort of the resolution that was used by the City Council to authorize the purchase of the property, it was really anticipated that the city would sell the property for another residential use. So that essentially makes it possible to reuse the property for residential use. We do have an organization that wants to purchase the property and work with a developer, Lennar Homes in this case, to build a home, and then the home would be used for veterans and their family. So it would be sort of the idea right now is for maybe a couple of years for a veteran and their family to live in the home while they get back on their feet. So that is the proposal. What will be needed to make this happen is a series of variances. This is, if there were a home on there right now, it would be a legal non-conforming lot. Given the proposed reuse of the property, given that the property is currently owned by the city, given that the City Council authorized purchase of the property so as to reuse the property for the use that is intended by the zoning ordinance, I will be supporting a variance proposal to reuse the property. If you look at the properties, the parcels that surround the subject property, they are 40 feet as well. Many of them are developed at the 40-foot lot. So it's 40 feet is the lot width, 60 feet is the minimum requirement, but these older lots are developed as they were initially built. And so the proposal would be to reuse the property really in the same way. So it's not before you this evening, but the city will be acting as applicant. I did want to bring it forward tonight as an informational item. I will be bringing the application forward at your next meeting. Ultimately, the variance would need approval by the City Council. As I will just reiterate, the city has a vested interest in seeing this property reused, and so that's what is being proposed. So at this point, I'm not asking for a formal action, but any input or feedback that you have would certainly be appreciated.
When there was a house on the lot, did it have a driveway coming off the alley as well? It looks like, I mean, the whole lot was seeded over. I just don't recall what was there, as far as
Is it?
access.
Oh, yeah, I think it was off of the alley.
Yeah, the rest of them
The
are.
house pretty much took up most of the space.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the case on a lot of these
Yeah.
city lots. I mean, that's what you used to call them, is just city lots.
Yeah. I was under the impression that it might have been a parking lot for the Veterans Park across.
That would not,
That was considered,
Yeah.
yeah.
that would be tough on that corner.
I know it's very small, but the park is small. and
Well,
there
just
isn't
the
anything for
access
the park.
from either
Pedestrians.
Margaret or 12th would be tricky.
Well, as long as someone
So-
discussed it, that was just my
Yeah.
impression when the city took it over. And again, we're just talking discussion. Sure. Yeah.
So do you think they're looking at, read in the, in the memo back from 2000, well, this is 2011. It was talking about potentially a green home or a cottage style. Do you know what anybody might be thinking? I mean, usually those are built up because the lot is so small, so you end up with 2.5 stories just to get enough living space. But you don't have any clue yet, I don't suppose.
I haven't seen the drawings.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just curious more than anything
I have a
else.
question.
Yes,
What makes this any different than the lot split on 17th that we considered a couple months ago? What's the difference?
Sure. So the lot, that it's city-owned, that the original intent was for the property to be reused for the same purpose. At some point, so these lots do predate the zoning ordinance. And the proposal to reuse the property is consistent with city goals for partnerships with nonprofits and reuse of city lots in these areas. And if you look at the development, a lot of the lots on these, I guess, 3 blocks, there are a lot of the lots developed at the 40-foot lot size. And this lot is not smaller than the other 40-foot lots.
well, isn't the other piece too that it's a non-conforming lot?
Yes.
It can't be used for residential, unless we allow it to be built on. The lot split on 17th was not non-conforming. It was larger. That request was to turn a conforming lot into 2 non-conforming ones. This is a non-conforming lot because it was legal at the time it was built. So the purpose is just to reuse it for the reason it was built. I think that's how I would explain it anyway.
Exactly.
Tom?
Yeah, and to piggyback on Al's question, I'm thinking also about the variance that was requested on Beam and First Avenue, I think it was. And so it gets into our particulars about what qualifies for a variance. And so how would this one be different as qualifying for a variance when the other one was not?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, with variances, there's case law has been well established that you don't need to worry about precedent, about setting precedent when approving a variance. You do look at them on a case-by-case basis. And then, so with Beam Avenue, the request was for a variance to build a larger garage. It was established even by the applicant that a garage could be built there. They just wanted a bigger one. In order to build a house on this property, which is all that it can be used for by zoning, a variance would be required.
So this is, it's practical difficulty right off of the bat.
Yes.
Right? So it kind of fits that requirement, because otherwise you can't do anything
Right.
Yeah.
with it. It's
As a
kind of-
residential lot, you can't build on it
Right.
unless you have a variance.
Molly, can I ask, you just mentioned about precedent, and you don't need to worry about precedent when approving a variance. I did not think that that was the case, because I was concerned that if we take the garage on Beam, for example, if we were to say, to allow that variance to occur, my concern was that we would be setting a precedent, and it would be very difficult to turn away somebody else that came in with a similar type of request.
So if you do that again and again and again, then yes, you should, and at that point, you should be looking at your zoning ordinance. But when just considering the possibility of one variance, you don't need to be concerned about precedent. And so when I came to Minnesota and started working with municipalities, I did see that there were a lot of variance requests. Well, that's for a number of reasons, primarily because in these cities, they're already built up. And the lots were created at a time before there was zoning. So, but at the same time, I said, okay, well, what are my resources other than asking colleagues about issuing variances and talking with staff in City Hall? Well, the League of Minnesota is a wonderful resource. And the League of Minnesota has some great papers that have been put out citing case law about variances, and that it's been established in Minnesota courts, and as is my experience in really nationwide, that precedent should not be a sole consideration when considering a variance.
So is it fair to say, though, that if you were to grant a variance, even though it didn't fit the criteria, it didn't meet the criteria for a variance, so there wasn't a practical difficulty, it didn't meet those other issues, but you decided to do it anyway, so the next person that comes in, it doesn't mean that we would technically be held to that we would have to do it, but wouldn't it be really hard to say no? So, I mean, that's kind of the point. So to me, it seems like, although you may not be legally bound by that precedent that you had from that variance that you granted before, it seems like it's an awfully slippery slope that if you grant a variance where something does not meet the criteria, that you may as well go ahead and rewrite your code right then and there.
So that's, I totally agree. There's the technical and then there's the practical. So you need to have very good findings of fact for why you grant a variance and for why you do not grant a variance. Technically, the burden is on the applicant to state why the variance should be granted, but I totally agree when you're sitting in your position and the city council's position, you are the one creating those findings. So if very good findings are written, then you can certainly justify any decision you make. And staff will provide their recommendation, and it should be based on the ordinance. And then the Planning Commission provides a recommendation. Ultimately, as we know, the decision is made by the City Council. But I think if each group makes their findings along the way, staff makes findings, Planning Commission makes findings, City Council makes findings, and that comes forward through a resolution. So if an applicant is saying, well, why aren't you approving mine? You're not approving this. You look at the findings that staff has put together, that the Planning Commission has put together, and then in the council discussion. So I think there is technically a burden on the applicant, but it's, at the same time, there's a burden on Planning Commission and City Council to provide a good record of their decision.
And I think a very big burden on the city council.
Yeah.
If the city planner makes a recommendation that says no, planning commission makes a recommendation that says no, and then the city council decides to override both of those and say yes, based on whatever findings of fact where they decide to move forward with this. So doesn't that make the case even tougher than for the city council to say anything other but yes when the next one comes up?
That's for you to decide. I can make my recommendations, and yeah, it can be hard, but I make them based on the ordinance, and that's a luxury that I have, and that's an ethical responsibility that I have.
But that's also a responsibility the council has when you take your oath as well. But I think the hardest part for the council might be figuring out their findings of fact that would override what the findings of fact were that were in the recommendation they got. I mean, you have to find some other fact then that says, oh, no, that fact is wrong. I mean, that gets tricky.
Well, so I was providing some training to new planning commissioners recently, and we did spend a lot of time on variances. And we talked about the differences between the council and the planning commission. Well, the council has to think about, well, we just came off of a moratorium for cutting into the street here 6 months ago. So we made that investment in repaving the road however many years ago. And, you know, this road is just going to get hammered by these new lots. Or, you know, we did just make this investment, or having these lots here will achieve something that we want to achieve in another section of the city code that the planning commission and the city planner is not involved in. There are just so many different things for the city council to consider.
Yeah. Okay, did we get off track there? I think we did. Okay, but that was a good discussion.
Yeah.
On to, the Planning Commission proposed summer schedule. These will be our
Yes.
summer parties.
I know, right? That seems to make sense. So we are hoping and anticipating that some exciting development projects will be coming in, submitting applications shortly. And so to accommodate those, as well as the more typical items that come before you, we're suggesting that a second meeting be added to each month. So this way, a small item that's more routine maybe doesn't have to be at the end of an agenda, or sit in a room with a lot of people here for a public hearing about a project that's not theirs, and that's not very typical for a planning commission agenda. So also there's the fact that the planning commission only meets once, and so many other dates have to be met before you can even get on the agenda. So what we're proposing, and just for your consideration, and hopefully we come up with consensus on something, but it would be so right now you meet on the first Thursday, so this proposal includes dates for the third Thursdays of the month, as well as going ahead and handling the July meeting. So right now, the first Thursday of July is July 4th. So what would you think about, it looks like when you've adjusted a meeting, it's gone to the day before.
Yeah.
It looks like that's past practice. So in this case, it would be July 3rd.
Better than Friday.
Yeah.
I'd rather do Wednesday.
Definitely.
How's everybody feel about that 3rd of July?
I'm going to be out of town that whole week.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I know. It's so far out. It's hard to know.
I may also be out that week, but you can go on without me.
Well, we'll do that tentatively, but we could always move it to the following week
It
as
occurred
well
to me
if we
that there
had
may
to.
be competing use for the space, but I don't think so.
On a Thursday?
Well, so for example, the second Thursday,
Yeah.
I will be out the 3rd as well. July
Okay.
3rd.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work.
right. So should we look for the second Thursday in July?
Yeah.
So then we'd be, at that point, I guess we would just keep it, so the second and third Thursdays in July. Okay.
I would just note that you have the wrong actual, like April 25th. That's the fourth Saturday. It's April 18th is, it looks like you've got this,
Thank you. April,
you've got, and then for the rest of them, you have the Tuesday dates, which would be the council meeting, so you want to just change. I think they're all Tuesdays. But anyway, just double check the calendar for the actual date.
sure.
And so these would be scheduled if needed, and how would we be informed? I mean, how
So
much notice would we get?
you would you would certainly get at least 1 week, quite possibly 2. So if you just pencil in so that the dates are the third, if I have these dates wrong, I'm going to go ahead and correct them.
It's April 18,
Okay,
June 21,
so
Or May-
April,
May 16 is good, I think.
so April 18, May 16.
is good. June 21st,
June 21st,
July 18th,
July 18,
August 16th,
August 16,
September 19,
September 19,
and October 17.
October 17.
And then I don't know what July would be. That would be the 11th and the 18th, I guess, huh?
So July 11th and 18. Okay. So we proactively dealt with July. That's good. Okay. So what I will do then is add these meetings to my calendar, and if there's nothing for these meetings, then I will let you know at least a week in advance. So if you would go ahead and put them on your calendars, and we will add them to the website, then we'll be good.
And then the packet would come out then that Friday before again, as usual.
Yes.
Okay. Mike's busy filling up his calendar with all the other things he wants to do over the summer.
I'm going to be gone a lot this summer, I think.
Okay. Well, it's kind of good news in a way if this is associated with the projects, particularly the housing ones that are on the horizon, so that's not a bad thing at all. Okay, then on to 2019 goals, and I guess the 2018 accomplishments.
So how do we usually do this? This is my first time for this meeting. Olivia prepared the request list and put together the accomplishments information.
Well, usually, because the council, they get this in their staff report, usually what I end up talking about very briefly is the goals for the upcoming year, because they're well aware of what we do, because most of the stuff we do goes to them at some point in time. So is there anything, since the council liaison is here, let me ask you, what would be of interest to the council?
It's a good question, Elaine, and I don't think we have to try and milk it and
No.
get everything
Oh,
we can out of
no.
it. So I think I couldn't agree more. I mean, all of this activity goes on to the council as it is. I think it would just be useful to talk about how we are scheduling new meetings. to handle what we hope is an increase in need. But otherwise, and probably the comprehensive plan, finalizing the comprehensive plan.
Right.
But otherwise, you know, it seems to me the planning commission just kind of takes what comes to it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we are not out trying to drum up business ourselves, you know, when things come to the city, then the planning commission gets involved as needed. So it's not like the Parks Commission or the
Right.
Environmental Commission or any, you know, so we're
Yeah.
sort of a different entity, so.
Well, that's what I've always
Yeah.
thought. It always seemed like such a, not much to talk about, really.
And
You
I
know.
think that's okay.
Oh, good.
You know what, here's what I wonder, Elaine, is kind of to our conversation that we had in the past on this, is maybe there's an opportunity to talk to the council and the city about the purpose of the planning commission and, you know, maybe something very simple, but, you know, kind of talking about what the planning commission considers when it looks at these things and sort of how the planning commission goes about its business.
That's maybe not a bad little intro or reminder.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, maybe that's something even Molly could
Yeah.
help with, just even if it's a single slide to say, this, you know, this is the purpose of a planning commission is, and what their objectives are as a commission,
Yeah.
and how that fits in with the city ordinances and with state statutes, et cetera.
Just include that as part of the little packet so they all have it.
Yeah, and I think that ties into the work with the comprehensive
Right.
plan. It
And
ties
having to
into-
look at the ordinances to make sure that they're in line with the comprehensive plan changes
Right.
that were made.
Like, why is the planning commission such a big part of looking at the comprehensive plan? Well, because, why is the planning commission involved in looking at lot splits and variances? Why do we do this? So it might be just something, just an opportunity to, because, you know, honestly, I think that people just don't know. And why would they, you know, unless they took some really focused interest in city government or something like that. But I think most people don't know what goes into this work. And so it's just a simple kind of educational opportunity.
Let's work on that together.
Okay.
Great. All right. I'll be in touch.
The other question I had was, I had thought, I think it was last year, that we should try to put together something like that, but more as a training piece for new commissioners, new planning commissioners, because it can be overwhelming, you know, when you first join and you don't really have that maybe as much understanding. And we didn't really, and maybe because of all the comp plan and the changes in staff, we didn't really get to that. So if either one of you, you know, have some resources that might be, you know, useful for that purpose, maybe you can put them together and bring them to one of our meetings just for a review, particularly for new members, you know, to gauge whether that was helpful or not. So that, I would like to see us be able to do that maybe this year, if we can fit it into one of our, 20 meetings that we have coming up?
So right now, WSB is partnering with GTS, which is maybe Governmental Training Services, to provide a number of sort of newer planning commission training events. I believe there's one in May, and the city is paying for planning commission members to attend those. What I can do is send out the information about those, but also if you do want to have something as part of your regular agenda, maybe let me know specifically what you're looking for so that I can tailor it and not take up, because what I'm talking about is 3 hours.
Well, I was talking more about just some reference material. Yeah, not even a big manual, but, you know, some kind of handout to get just a good overall picture of what's the difference between a variance and a conditional use permit and a regular ordinance and permits and that kind of information that I think would make it easier to understand even, what we were doing.
Remember those online courses we took?
Yes,
Yeah, those are very good too.
yeah. But I would like it also to just be something,
Short,
everybody
go back.
doesn't want to do an online course or maybe
But it
can't
wasn't
drive to a meeting someplace, to a training session.
Elaine,
Or have children.
Or,
you know,
yeah,
it's hard to
exactly.
find
Yes,
Yeah.
hours to go someplace.
when I started, I can't remember who was Jim, what was his name?
Hennick?
Hennick, he's
Yeah.
retired.
I went to him and he gave me a bunch of minutes to
Yeah.
past planning commission. Those are very helpful.
Absolutely, and those can even be found online if you're
Yes,
I
looking
did
for that sort of
when I
thing.
first started. I did read a
Yeah.
whole bunch of old, but when you don't know the terminology.
Right.
you know,
exactly,
kinda need a
exactly.
glossary
Yeah.
of what all the
Yeah.
words mean.
Yeah.
And why in this case, this might have happened versus in that case, something else happened, yeah.
Sure.
So that's really what I was thinking of, not a great big project, but just something that would, be instructive more than anything else.
Absolutely, I'll include that for folks who get packets by, I'll include a hard copy for folks who get the packet delivered to them. I'll include it with your next packet. For those who don't, I'll just bring it to the
Okay.
meeting.
Excellent, and you'll be a good, well, all of us can read it and see, oh,
Yeah.
now I understand what I've been
remember
doing. Okay, do you have any idea when this will be on the council agenda, my little song and dance?
Because we will want to work together a little bit, so let's say the first meeting in May.
Okay,
Does that work for you?
okay.
Okay.
Okay, then, I think we're done. Oh, we did 2019 goals too, so that's done. All right, reports from, did you have anything else before I go to,
I do not.
okay. Reports from commissioners. We start with Councilmember Sonic.
Okay, I don't have a lot. I think some of this is kind of repetitive, but just wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to see the article that was in the Star Tribune on March 28th.
Yeah, that was
Molly
really
Just was quoted in that article.
cool. Very good.
But just an excellent article on what's going on in North St. Paul. I love this opening line. The last time North St. Paul had a building boom, city leaders say, Elvis Presley was crooning on the jukebox. So it's pretty cool. And this is exciting. And Molly, as you pointed out in the article as well, it's due to some of the initiative that the city has taken. It's not just that things have kind of fallen into our lap. I mean, there's a lot of hard work that the EDA, the Economic Development Authority, has done, and the city in buying some of these parcels of land, to make some of these things possible. We're finally starting to see that pay off, I think. So that's, it's just really exciting. So hopefully, and just as the owner of La Garage, we're feeling optimistic that this will just bring more traffic into downtown and spur other businesses on to say, that looks like a good place to open up shop or open up grill or,
Coffee shop.
some kind of restaurant or something,
I
yeah.
want my coffee shop.
So another bar, maybe we could get an antique store to.
Novel idea.
Did I hear bookshop?
Just a couple other things really quickly. One, we had a change or updated the small cell wireless ordinance at the council meeting this week. I don't know if everybody's aware with what that is exactly, but with the 5G, so the fifth generation of the network capability for the wireless, it requires a different kind of network of antenna to be set up throughout the city. So instead of just the ones that are way up on the water towers or that kind of thing, these ones need to be spaced more regularly throughout cities and lower to the ground. And so there's potential that, and there was a state law that was passed that we have to allow these users to use our right-of-way to put these things up. So they may be added to our light poles, they may be added to telephone poles, whatever, or if there's not something there, they may add their own pole to put one of these things on there. So, I don't know if they're always very nondescript either, so, but, we have to allow those things to go in, so.
You need a special phone too to use it.
What's that?
You need a special phone to use it.
Yeah, it's gotta be capable of the 5G connectivity, right? Yeah.
An article in the paper this morning said the east side of St. Paul was left out.
Oh, really?
Mainly right now, I know it's Minneapolis area.
Yeah, I think Minneapolis had just completed their network.
So it's my understanding that Chicago and Minneapolis are the first cities in the country where this is rolling out. And as we read in the paper, it's specific to certain locations, heavily populated locations in the downtown.
Makes sense. There's some concern out there about potential health impacts from these things. From the research that I've done, there's nothing, no study right now has proven that these things can have any kind of health impacts. Just like noise from windmills, there's no evidence on that. They don't cause cancer. So just, you may hear things about that will the 5G network cause health impacts on people or something like that? From what I've seen, nobody's saying for sure. I've seen people say absolutely not, it won't, and other people are saying it's caused cancer in lab rats. I don't know. So from what I also understand is that if you have a wireless router in your home, you are experiencing those same waves right now. So if it's not affecting you now with your wireless router, it probably won't in the future.
When is that supposed to roll out here?
It
Do you have
just
any
really
idea?
depends, so the providers may want to, and there are 4 providers, and they could each do this, and they may never do North St. Paul, or maybe sometime in the distant future, who knows? So there's no time frame for it
Will
right now.
each provider put up their own, or can they, really,
They
each
can.
provider has to put up their own?
So you could have a
That
lot.
could be really ugly.
You have a boulevard full of them.
Um,
Well,
Can't you regulate that like we do garbage collection?
No.
All right.
They may be able to share a post. I mean, if there's a light post or a telephone pole, I mean, they could all co-locate on the same pole. And then if one of them puts up a pole to put up their thing, I suppose another provider could try and co-locate on that same pole. I don't know.
Have you seen them in
details.
Minneapolis? Has anybody seen them, what they look like? Are they big, or they?
I've only seen pictures, and it kind of depends on
I
where
have
they are
not.
sometimes.
It really does seem to be that a thing that they just kind of end up blending into the background.
I think unless they're on the ground, they're not as visible because they're up. You don't tend to
On a,
look like.
These ones
Yeah.
would be lower. It's important for the functionality for them to be lower to the ground, from what I understand.
30 feet?
No. Do
Within,
you know, Molly?
10, 12 feet.
yeah,
It's-
much closer
Mhm.
to the ground.
Oh, that's
They're
very,
still up.
okay.
Yeah, so we'll see. There's nothing that imminent that somebody's going to be planting these things all over town anytime soon, but that is a thing that we had to meet a deadline in order to have this thing. We had to have some kind of ordinance written, otherwise we would have just been kind of out of luck and would have had no control over some of those decisions. Right now, we can deny a permit, but we have to have really legitimate reason for denying a permit for the location of a pole in a specific location, but it doesn't mean that you can't deny it altogether. They still have to be allowed to use the right-of-way. Yeah. If you Google pictures, you can see all sorts of different options on those things. So, just something that's on the horizon for us. The last thing I have is just that, I don't know if you had all heard, this is somewhat related to planning commission things, is that our, since Jim Hennick did resign, we've been using MinSpect, which is third-party service to do our building inspection services. And we've been very happy with them so far. And so we did just negotiate a 5-year contract with Minspec to continue doing our inspection process for us. So on the downside, we don't have someone in City Hall that you can come and talk to. But on the upside, there's always an inspector available that you can talk to on the phone. So whereas in the past, and I've used our building inspector many times in the past working on projects on my own home, I always enjoyed being able to come in and talk through my plans with Jim Hennick. But it was dependent on Jim being here. You know, I had to catch him at the right time because he was out on the road a lot. But now, you know, I may be able to talk through my plans, share them electronically with someone from Minspec on the phone, and then there would always be someone available. Also, because of their own technology, we may be moving toward a point where we would be able to procure permits online, you know, which is something that we had wanted to do in the future at some point anyway through our own North St. Paul website. We just don't have the technology to do that right now. This way, the third party provides that technology and we don't have to worry about it. So that can really simplify things, especially for, you know, people who can't be at City Hall between 8 and 5 or whatever it is. So to be able to apply for and receive a permit online could be really helpful. So there are some good upsides to using this. And I think it saves us money as well. That's all I had.
Okay.
Questions?
Any questions?
Any progress on building?
You know, I'm sure there is. I don't know exactly what's been happening, but things are moving along. I know, what's the name of it? McKnight Gateway or something like that?
The townhomes, yes, they are definitely moving forward. We have some preliminary plans.
But no breaking of ground?
No.
I saw a Quick Trip, I think, going in too.
Yep, so we have heard, I think I mentioned this the last time, a Quick Trip potentially on the north end of the Anchor Block site,
Corner.
potentially. And then an apartment building east of that, and then a storage building east of that between Shifsky's, or next to Shifsky's. So those are things that are floating around out there right now, so nothing nailed down.
Frontage road?
We're working with the county on the concept of a road going sort of bisecting from north to south. Instead of a strict frontage road, a road would go all the way through the parcel east to west.
And is that in the plans this summer or next?
So we don't have nothing's been filed yet
Okay.
for what we're calling Anchor Block North. But yes, there are conversations.
On 7th and County Road B, there's a sign that says future development. Isn't that right in the middle of a proposed traffic circle?
There's not development that would be occurring in the middle of.
Where that sign is, it's really,
I'm sorry, I've not.
That's the McKnight Gateway. And so we have long talked about how to do something with that intersection there, so that's 7th South and Third? 7th South and Third, yeah, so that really weird intersection. And so there's potential that we could speed up development in that area because of the townhomes going in there. But that would be the development that's happening there is the townhomes, because that's right.
but there's just one lot right where the sign is. I mean, then there's houses right down there on County Road B.
Yeah, so
It's my phone again.
the townhomes are just sort of north of that.
Yeah, north of the existing houses on County Road B.
Yeah.
But the sign is right up on the corner.
They may have approval to have the sign located.
Okay.
where people can see it.
No, I'm not really
Put it down
complaining,
third,
but I
nobody's
remember,
gonna see it.
it wasn't that many meetings ago where we got the plans, and it looked like that was gonna be a traffic
Yeah.
circle. And I saw that sign, and I wondered about that.
Yeah, we're very conscious about that intersection, wanting to make sure that we can
Yes.
do something
Yeah.
that would help
Yes, yes,
move the
yes.
traffic in that area.
Yeah, that doesn't need any more traffic.
And it will have
Things
it,
up.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
it
not the
will.
way it is.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
That's it for me.
all right then. Well,
You were going down the line.
well, no, because I didn't even get to Al yet.
Okay, all right.
Oh, you want me to go this way and then back?
No, I don't care.
Al, did you have
I got a
anything?
cold.
I have a question.
Yes,
There's 8 members to our commission right now, right?
7.
I thought 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well, Tom isn't a
Tom's
voting
not. Tom's-
member.
Yeah, a voting member.
Reason I asked, I only see 7 chairs and microphones.
I know.
Does that mean everybody has to have at least one absence?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, no, sometimes, remember when Tom used to go sit at the kids' table? When we have a full. Me? Yeah, otherwise, we just kind of squish together and share.
Just wondering.
I know. I know, it is kind of weird, isn't it? But that's the way it is. Wasn't set up for us, it's set up for the council. John, anything?
I don't have anything.
Tricia? No. I don't have anything. So,
I move we adjourn.
Oh, look at that.
motion to adjourn by Al, is there a second?
Second.
Oh, man, wow. I'll give it to you, Tricia. Second by Tricia. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. All right, we're adjourned, and maybe meeting on the 18th, or if not the 18th, the 2nd of May. We will hear. Thanks.